What is going on, everybody? Welcome into the Stanley Cup Final Preview Edition, Breakaway Bandits podcast, part of the Sports Insanity. Let's try that again. Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to the Breakaway Bandits podcast, part of the Sports Insanity Network. I am Mike Rifkin. Hope everybody is doing well on this fine June evening. So here we are. We're down to the final two. Stanley Cup championship rematch from last year with the Oilers and the Panthers. Difference being the Oilers have home ice advantage this year. So if it goes to game seven like it did last year, game will be played in Edmonton, not Florida. So we'll break down that series. We're also going to break down some news that's been stuff we've been hearing as we gear up towards the off season as well. You got a new coach in Seattle. We will talk about that. Sabres front office is a little bit of a shakeup. We will talk about that as well. But let's get into the nuts and bolts here. We're here to talk the Stanley Cup final. That'll start Wednesday night in Edmonton with the Panthers and the Oilers. The Panthers won the series last year, 4-3. Epic 7-game series. If you remember correctly, the Panthers went up 3-0 in that series. All of a sudden, the Oilers found their game, got it to a game 7, and eventually an empty net goal. But it was a 2-1 hockey game for the most part. So I expect a very big, similar series here. Both these teams have changed in the span of a year. Let's give them that. Let's start with Edmonton first because they're going to be the team. I think more people want to hear. Well, not more people want to hear about, but look, I think this is a massive series for Connor McDavid. This is an opportunity for him to right the wrongs of last year's series. And if they can find a way to win their first Stanley Cup since, a long time, Canada's first cup since 1993. This is a big series for McDavid. And he, as great as he's been, and he's been awesome, he was really good in the Western Conference Final against Dallas. He's going to have to go up another level here. Him and Draisaitl. And I expect both of them to have major impacts on the series. We'll have to see what happens with Nico Mikkola, if he could come play for Florida or if he's going to be done. But there's a massive hole for the Oilers in their lineup. Zach Hyman's not playing in this series after suffering an injury. So that's a big loss. But the guy who took his place, both of the power play and kind of even strength, Corey Perry. Corey Perry had an excellent series against the Dallas Stars, one of his former teams. They're going to need Corey Perry to get up in the Grove, Sergei Bobrovsky, every game. That's what they're going to really need. They have Evander Kane back. They also are going to get Connor Brown back. It looks like that's what Chris Knobloch said this afternoon. It looks like Connor Brown will be ready. So Edmonton's going in minus Hyman, but they're fully healthy. Matthias Ekholm is back. That was a major get for them. That was a major get back for them a couple of games ago against Dallas. So that's the Edmonton side. Florida, we know. They're looking to repeat. This is their third straight Cup final. And we know the brand of hockey the Florida Panthers want to play. They want to play heavy hockey, force you into mistakes, and then their forecheck is just going to get to you. Whether it's Sam Bennett, whether it's Alexander Barkov, who won his third career Selke today. So congrats to Barkov on that. They have a very mobile defense led by Aaron Ekblad, Gus Forsling. Seth Jones has quietly had a really nice playoffs as well. That was a huge addition for them at the trade deadline. So what is this series going to come down to? I think this series comes down to three things. And I think it's the basis of every series: special teams, goaltending, and who's got the better depth. And whose depth players could step up. So let's start with the special teams. Edmonton was brutal on the power play against the LA Kings and Vegas. It wasn't that good. It came to life against Dallas. We'll get into Dallas in a few minutes. But we know the talent they have on that power play. And remember, they don't have Hyman, but Corey Perry filled in that role exceptionally well. So that was really important. Their PK's been pretty good most of the year, so I'll give them credit for that. McDavid's even killing penalties now. Nugent Hopkins is helpful in there. So we know what the penalty kill is going to bring. We know what the power play should bring. Then we're going to get into the goaltending. And look, Stuart Skinner, I've been very critical of Stuart Skinner, and I think a lot of people have been critical of Stuart Skinner. Do I still think he's an average goalie? I do. But listen, he's played very well since coming back into the lineup, but you have to give him that. That being said, Sergei Bobrovsky's been on his game all playoffs, so that's going to be a tough matchup. Because if Bob could pitch a shutout at any point, can Stuart Skinner? He's done it. Let's see him prove it here. Then there's the depth. The Oilers' secondary scoring has always been a question mark. This playoff's been big. Corey Perry, Nugent Hopkins. They've gotten offense from a lot of different sources outside of just McDavid and Draisaitl. Flip that to Florida. I think Florida's got, 17 guys with a goal. It's insane the depth the depth scoring they're getting. And you can make a case. Every line has had a great series. The third line with Lundin, Luosterainen, and Marchand. What a line that was against Toronto. Sam Bennett's made a massive impact. Him and his line have been impactful. Obviously, Barkov's been impactful. Evan Rodriguez, who's a guy they want to have score some goals, he just got his first goal of the playoffs. Carter Verhaeghe has been massive in this playoff. Sam Reinhart has not had the playoff you would think, but you get him going, that's a whole nother animal. So these are two teams that are very deep. Good goaltending both sides. Special teams really good on both sides. So what's the X factor? Well, I could sit here and tell you Connor McDavid is the X factor. I don't think he is, because we know how good Connor McDavid is. So if I'm going to go X factors for both teams, I think the X factor for Edmonton, I'm going to go with two. Corey Perry's got to be an X factor, because he's going to be an X factor in any series. And Ryan Nugent Hopkins. Nugent Hopkins had a really good series against the Dallas Stars. If he can carry that over into the Stanley Cup final, that is a massive win for the Edmonton Oilers, because he gives them another option on the power play, and at even strength, he becomes a different kind of factor depending on how you want to match up against Edmonton. And remember, last change, Florida's X factor. And again, I'm going to go two. I'm going to go back end first. We talked about how good Gustav Forsling was last year. And I thought he was really good against Carolina. his ability to move the puck himself, transfer point A to point B. Miro Heiskanen, even at not at 100%, was kind of giving the Oilers some fits with that. And the Oilers kind of adjusted to that off of both Heiskanen and Thomas Harley. So I'm wondering how that plays out for Florida. The other guy who's an X Factor is Marchand. Marchand is going to do everything in his power to get under the skin. Vander Kane, Corey Perry, even McDavid, he's going to try to get under your skin, and he's going to be successful. At some point in the series, Brad Marchand's going to make an impact. So, who do I like? First time since 2009 that we're having a rematch. Remember, 08-09 was the Penguins and the Red Wings. Following year, same thing. Sidney Crosby won his first the second time. Does that mean Connor McDavid's going to win his first cup the second time around? I'm going to go no. I think Florida repeats. I just there's something about them, and I don't think Edmonton wants to get into their kind of game. Edmonton can be as physical as they want. Florida embraces this. I like the Panthers. I think the Hyman injury becomes a factor. I'm going to go Panthers in 6. Would I be shocked if it's Panthers in 7? Absolutely not. But I like Florida to get the job done. And I think the Oilers, the thing is going to be this. I think Stuart Skinner's going to let in some softies, and they're going to have to explore goaltending this summer. So, which I still think they should have done last summer. It's a whole nother conversation. Okay. So let's get into the we just talked about the two teams playing in the Cup final. Let's go back to the conference final for a minute. We had the Hurricanes and the Panthers. The Panthers dispatched the Hurricanes in 5 games. Really made it look easy, if we're being honest. So what happens next for the Carolina Hurricanes? Well, look, they had a tremendous season. Again, they got to find a way to get over that hump. And how do they do it? Well, I think they got to get a little bit more explosive offensively. You don't think they wish they had Mikko Rantanen in here? So Carolina, they're going to have about $28 million in cap space, which is a nice number to have. Their key free agents, Jack Roslovic, who had 39 points, Eric Robinson, 32, Tyson Jost had 9 points in 39 games. Roslovic, yeah, hit or miss. Eric Robinson had a career year, so that's not really going to cost you much if you want to keep him. Tyson Jost, again, I think that's a depth forward for them. Then you got Brent Burns, who had 29 points, and Dmitry Orlov, who had 28. Orlov was terrible in the playoffs, in particular the series against the Florida Panthers. He was god-awful. So I don't think he's coming back. Brent Burns at the age of 41 or 42. I'm okay with letting him walk. If you want to bring him back on a 1-year deal, that's not going to crush you cap-wise. And then Logan Stankoven and Jackson Blake. Remember, Stankoven's the big piece they got in the Rantanen deal. They're RFAs after next season. So maybe they can find a way to get them done this summer, especially Stankoven. But 28.4, look, I love the Carolina Hurricanes. I love what Rob Brendamore and company have built. I think they need a game breaker offensively. Sebastian Aho is a great player. Andrei Svechnikov, there was an APB put out for him on this series because he made zero impact. They need another guy and a guy who can kind of drive his own line. Now, if they think that Svechnikov could drive his own line, and then you could split him and Aho up for another guy, then that's fine. If I'm Carolina, there's a couple of names I'm looking at. I'm definitely going to look into Mitch Marner if I'm Carolina. I would absolutely look into that. But I think if you're Brock Besser's a guy too, and Brock Besser's not going to cost you what Marner cost you. But the question about Besser would be, can he drive his own line? Or does he need to play with somebody? They do have Seth Jarvis, who's a really good young player too. So they're going to have to figure something. But they need another guy. They need a guy who could help them put the puck in the back of the net. They did bring back Freddie Anderson for next year, so Freddie's going to be in goal with Kachetkov. Defensively, look, they're going to do their thing. They brought up a couple of kids here late in the postseason. They're probably going to get a chance next year. Chatfield will be back too. But they need a guy who can help them score some goals, whether they're greasy goals or they just need guys who can help them score. That was as good as Bobrovsky was. There were opportunities for the Canes in that series, and they just didn't take full advantage. So I think that's the plan this summer. They got to get some guys who could help finish. So that's Carolina. Let's go to the other team who lost the conference final, the Dallas Stars. Third straight year they lost in the conference final. They're not going to have the luxury of as much cap space. They have about $5 million. Their key free agents include Jamie Benn, Matt Duchene, Evgeny Dadonov, and Mikhail Granlund. Jason Robertson's in an RFA after this season. He's got one more year of that, and then he's a UFA. And then there's reports today that they might listen on a Jason Robertson trade. And I'll tell you this, any team in the National Hockey League, I'm calling on Jason Robertson. I am 100% picking up that phone and asking Jimmy Nill, what do you want for Jason Robertson? He is still a young player. He has scored 30 goals. He's hit 40 goals. Jason Robertson's a big-time player. And I'll tell you this, as a New York Ranger fan, I've been anti-trading Alexei Lafreniere. This might be the only player I would trade Lafreniere for. Now, that's not saying I'm blowing up the whole thing for him, but that would be the kind of player I want. I would want Jason Robertson on my team any day of the week, twice on Sunday. So with that being said, you have about $5 million in cap space. Their big move, remember, was bringing in Mikko Rantanen and then signing him to an extension. So Jamie Benn's been the captain there for a long time. That's going to depend on the number for me. I'm not opposed to saying goodbye. Matt Duchene, he was invisible. He didn't have a point that wasn't a power play point I believe in the playoffs. I think all of his points were on the power play. Dadonov was a scratch the last couple of games. That is a very, that's not a good sign. I don't think he's back. Mikael Granlund had a huge impact on this team. Had a big hat trick in one of the playoff games. Played very well in PK and the power play. I might be inclined to say I'd rather bring back Mikael Granlund than Jamie Benn. And that sounds mean, but look, if Jamie Benn's willing to sign like a 1 year, $2.5 million contract, then maybe we have a conversation. But I think you got to look at Mikael Granlund. Plus, he plays center. He's got some speed to him. Plays every facet of the game. I like Granlund a lot. So my thing if I'm Jimmy Neal might be Granlund over Jamie Benn, unless Jamie Benn's willing to give me a little bit of a discount. And then there's a coaching situation in Dallas. Look, Pete DeBoer made a very interesting quote and a very interesting decision in Game 7. Pulled Jake Ottinger after giving up 2 goals, neither one of which I believe were his fault. He kind of threw Ottinger under the bus after Game 7. And then this from David Pagnotta on June 2nd, which is they were recording. Noise out of Dallas, sorry, Pete DeBoer. Per multiple sources, players are not pleased with how he handled several situations during the Western Conference Final, along with post-Game 5 and exit media remarks. Told players voiced concerns during internal exit interviews. DeBoer does have 1 year left on his deal. And look, when you throw your star goaltender under the bus, it's not a good thing. And whenever you throw anyone under the bus, and look, I thought Jake Ottinger. Do I think Jake Ottinger could have played better? I'll say sure, but listen, it's not his fault that Maverick Bourque took a stupid high sticking penalty. It's not Jake Ottinger's fault that Corey Perry's wide open in front for a redirect. These are little things that cost the Dallas Stars. It's not Jake Ottinger's fault that guys like Mikko Rantanen, Sagan, Ben, Duchesne, they stopped scoring goals. That's Jake Ottinger's fault. I like Pete DeBoer as a coach. I think he's a good coach. I think he's a very good coach. I think he's made up his. I think a decision should be made. I think he's probably out. The question would be who comes in and takes his spot. I'll tell you what, that'll be a very desirable job because it's a desirable team that I think is right on the cusp of winning it all. They were my preseason pick. They will continue to be they will continue to get a lot of love from me because I think the Dallas Stars are a very good hockey team. So there's that. All right. So we've talked about what comes next to Dallas, what comes next to Carolina, Cup final preview. All right, let's get into some of the new stuff. Let's start with Lane Lambert. Lane Lambert was named the coach of the Seattle Kraken. He'll become the third coaching Kraken history, placing Dan Bilesma. 2 years as the Islanders head coach, he was 61, 46, and 20. Look, Lane Lambert was a holdover from the Barry Trotz era. That was really it. This doesn't move the needle for me from the Seattle Kraken at all. None of their hires have really moved the needle for me. Dave Hackstall was a random hire. Dan Bilesma at least was in their American League team before he got called back up to duty. And now Lane Lambert, who was an assistant in Toronto. I thought this was going to be the time the Kraken actually make a big hire, whether that was Peter Laviolette or John Tortorella. They chose not to do either of those. They chose Lane Lambert. I'll hold off judgment. Let's see what the Kraken do this summer. Um, they were a disappointment this year because a lot of people thought they were going to take a next step and they didn't do it. So they're still waiting on that. So this move doesn't move the needle for me, to be honest with you. Let's see what the roster looks like. The Philip Grubauer situation is going to be interesting there too. So we'll see what happens with Seattle. But Lane Lambert for me, don't love it. And then there's Jarmo Kekalainen, who's going to be an advisor for the Buffalo Sabres. Let me start by saying this. This is a message. This is a message to Kevin Adams. This is a message to everyone. Excuse me. This is a message to everybody. We have to swing big here. And make your move towards Mitch Marner or whatever you think it is. But I think if Kevin Adams strikes out, I think Yarmo's taking over. I think this has got to be the wake up call because if Kevin Adams, who's really gotten away with a lot in Buffalo, if he continues to get away with a lot, Terry Pagula is going to have to eat some of his words because Terry Pagula can't get away with just, hey, the Bills are good guys. The Sabres have the longest playoff drive of any team in the four major sports. The Sabre fan deserves better than the product they've put out on the ice. So I think Jarmo Kekalainen is like, hey, we have money to spend. We have to spend it on the right players because it's time we actually got competitive. 2 years ago, we missed the playoffs by 1 point. How many points are we going to miss this year by? It can't be a joke anymore. So, all right. So that's Jarmo talk for a little bit. I know Nate's very excited over Jarmo. And then, look, let's talk a little bit about some stuff some things we've read over the last little bit. Hold on, this is NHL Rumor Report on Twitter. There are a couple of. This is from Elliot Friedman. The Rangers are a team to keep an eye on in the next few weeks. Chris Drury telling teams he's ready for offers. A couple of questions on who. We all presume Chris Kreider is on the table. I think Mika Zibanejad is on the table. The one name I'm very curious about is Artemi Panarin. Look, I'm going to talk strictly on the ice. I'm not going to go into the off ice stuff. So again, don't know. I do know what the Athletic had reported, but I'm not getting into that mainly because I don't know the whole story. I did not read the whole story. Artemi Panarin's been one of the best Ranger free agent signings in my lifetime. So unless the number is really bad on an extension, I'm very curious on what they see, on what they're going to do. Like I said before, I'm not trading Alexei Lafreniere unless they're going to do it in a deal for Jason Robertson, but then I'm not blowing this whole thing up for just Jason Robertson. So I wouldn't give up Lafreniere and two other young guys for Robertson, as much as I like Jason Robertson. But if you're going to tell me it's Lafreniere, Zach Jones, and a draft pick, then I can definitely, absolutely consider that. Excuse me. As we continue going down, Dave Pagnotta again, fourth period. Sam Bennett's preference is to stay in Florida. I don't blame him. No state income tax. Elliot Friedman. The Leafs are considering buyouts on some of the players towards the bottom of their lineup. That's interesting to me because he's saying bottom. He's not going top. And look, they were never buying out Austin Matthews, or they're not buying out William Nylander. That was never going to happen. But who are we talking about towards the bottom? Cal Yarncroke? Is that a guy they would look at? Kind of like a Swiss Army knife player. Someone like Oliver Ekman Larson, who I thought signed a 1-year deal, but I could be wrong. But listen, I think the Leafs are in a very interesting spot. One, they have to let Mitch Marner go. Two, I'm intrigued by the whole Tavares thing, see what happens there. But three, what other changes are they going to make? Brad Treliving talked about the DNA having to change. And it started with Brendan Shanahan now leaving. Now it has to hit the roster. For the first time, it's hitting the roster. Because they've changed GMs, they've changed coaches, they've changed whatever. Now they have to change stuff on this roster, something they've refused to do over the years. Dave Pagnota again. The Sabres may circle back on Elias Pettersson discussions. So we'll see what happens there. And the other bit of news, Jonathan Toews is making a comeback. Told his agent he wants to return to the NHL. Remember, he's been out because of COVID. He had long COVID, didn't want to come back. So he was semi-retired. I think there's 3 spots for Jonathan Toews. I think any team, one, he's going to want to win. So that's first and foremost. But I think there's a couple of teams that could land. Winnipeg could certainly land him. He's from Winnipeg. That's a team again on the cusp. We'll see what happens there. Anaheim, which just hired Joel Quenneville. Now, they're not a winner yet, but who knows? Now, if someone's going to comment the Leafs, I'm going to come back with this. Can you really call yourself a contender with John Tavares and Jonathan Toews as your 2 and 3 centers at this stage of their career? I would say no. So I think Anaheim, Winnipeg would be the top 2. And then I'm going to throw a third one out there that I kind of wonder what people would think. And it's a team we kind of talked about earlier. The Dallas Stars. I kind of wonder, in being in the Central Division his whole career, could Dallas make a play? Could Colorado make a play? Very interesting, but welcome back, Jonathan Toews. That should be big. That's big news in the NHL. Outside of that, look, we're going to get into a lot of the offseason stuff once the offseason begins. I know July 1st, I'm considering going live that night to talk about all the deals, but we're going to break that down. We got the Stanley Cup final coming. Again, my pick is Panthers at 6. Listen, I think everyone should enjoy this Cup final because I think it'll be great. That'll do it for this edition of Breakaway Bandits podcast, part of the Sports Insanity Network. Let's check us out. Go to the website, thesportsinsanitynetwork.com. Great blogs, vlogs, planes, trains, and automobiles. Follow us on the socials. Twitter, Insanity Real, Facebook, the Sports Insanity Network. Follow me personally on Twitter, Punmaster Rifkin. I am also on Blue Sky as well, same name. Listen to this podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Live on YouTube right now, so you can always go back and watch this video. Like, comment, subscribe on there, ring the bell. And look, if the Oilers win this in 6, you could comment and call me an idiot. But the pick is the Panthers in 6. Thank you for listening to this edition of the Breakaway Bandits podcast, part of the Sports Insanity Network. Have a good one, everybody, and enjoy the Stanley Cup final.